Hello, everyone. My name is Joey Racy, and I am the Assistant Director of Marketing and Publications at the University of Cincinnati College of Law. And today we are going to be learning about a new podcast that will be under the Cincy Lawcast umbrella, and that is called the Corporate Law Lab. And to explain the Corporate Law Lab to us, we have the Director of the Corporate Law Center here at the University of Cincinnati College of Law, Neil Taylor.
Hi, how are you?
Great. And I'm going to start off with a couple easy questions to just get to know you better. So why don't we start off with, who are you?
So my name is Neil Taylor. I'm the director of the Corporate Law Center here at the University of Cincinnati College of Law. I actually graduated from this school in 1991. I promptly left Cincinnati. Not that there's anything wrong with Cincinnati. I just had an opportunity to work at a law firm in Phoenix, Lewis and Roca. I actually started as a litigator. I met with some of our 1Ls, our first year law students this morning, and I told them, if you'd told me when I was sitting in their chairs that I'd be back as a corporate law director, I would have not believed it because I didn't think I was going to be a corporate lawyer. So I spent the first 6 years in private practice as a litigator, mostly with corporate clients. I got the opportunity to go in-house with a company called Avnet, where I started by managing their in-house litigation, and over time moved into more of a generalist, managed the in-house legal department for the Americas. Later, I moved to Brussels, Belgium, where I managed the European legal department. I went on to Millicom International Cellular, based in Luxembourg, as general counsel. It was a NASDAQ 100 company that was a mobile network operator focused entirely in emerging markets, where I started doing a lot of work in emerging markets, especially in Africa. In about 15 years ago, I became the chief legal officer of Helios Towers Africa, which was, I had sold the towers to Helios in my prior role at Millicom, and joined that private equity-based startup, and spent most of my next 10 years doing startups in the telecom infrastructure space in Africa. Eventually, I moved to Africa. Ran a small startup food distribution business in Cape Town, and about 6 months ago moved back to the US and was lucky enough to get this opportunity to be the first full-time director of the UC Corporate Law Center.
So you've been doing a lot since you left Cincinnati originally. You've been working in multiple different countries, multiple different areas. Seems like it's all been in that corporate world, and then specifically the latter half has been in that communications world within corporate law. So what are you bringing to the Corporate Law Center as the director? What is the new direction, or what direction are we going forward with the Corporate Law Center?
So I think I'm really starting with a focus on content. So many of us start our careers as law students and have an idea of what it is we think we might want to do, but there wasn't a whole lot, at least when I was in law school, that gave you real exposure to what the lawyers out there are actually doing. So I want to use my experiences and the contacts that I've developed over the last 30 some years to give wide exposure to our students and to really anyone that's interested in talking about the law. Give them exposure to a lot of different paths. I would get questions all the time from young lawyers who would say, I want to be an international lawyer like you. I want to do what you do. How do I do that? And I never quite knew how to answer the question because, all of us follow a different path, and there are so many different paths to get to being a general counsel of a company, or following a particular specialty, that my thought is, if I get people that I know and people that I've been introduced to alumni of the college, and we talked to 30 different people or 40 different people about the paths that they followed, what they do, how they do it, what they think is important to how they've been successful, that it will give people a much better idea of how to pursue different opportunities and not think that there's just a, one size fits all path to doing things that you find interesting and having a career in corporate law.
So I'm hearing that this podcast wouldn't just be for a very specific, streamlined path of corporate law. So is this podcast meant for any law student, just law students, corporate law focused law students? Who would find benefit beyond maybe the obvious category from this podcast?
So I think there are two main target audiences. I think law students is certainly one of them. I also think that for a lot of young lawyers who are early in their careers, maybe they're associates at law firms, maybe they have just gone in-house, there is an awful lot out there on how to be a general counsel. I don't think there's nearly enough advice or a broad enough advice to people that want to become a general counsel or want to become a partner in a law firm of how you actually do that. And I think by having those conversations with a lot of different people, we will open up different ways of thinking about it, different ways of pursuing those goals. So I think, the road that different people have taken, I think is going to be of interest, not only to law students, but to people who are, recent graduates. And then I think to anybody that loves talking about the law. I mean, one of the different streams that we're talking about is to talk to litigators, both people who are early in their careers and people who are retired, about their interactions with corporate law. And, if nothing else, listening to litigators tell stories is always fun. It doesn't matter, whether you're a lawyer or not. I think it's going to be most interesting to lawyers, but who knows? It might be interesting to people that just find talking about the law of interest.
Awesome. So that seems like any area focused involved in the legal profession is a safe bet that this podcast would have benefits for them.
Yeah, exactly. And, as I've said to the students often, and I've heard our dean say as well, people tend to think that they are going to be defined by the first job they get coming out of law school. And I think if anything from my career and from a lot of the people we'll be talking to on this podcast, you'll see that that's just not necessarily true. I know people who graduated, joined the firm, and they are still there, 35 years later. But I know very few of those people. I know a lot more people who have taken very interesting paths, and a lot of different opportunities came their way that maybe wouldn't have if they had, just had a very narrow focus on there's only one way.
So why don't we talk about some of these interesting people that we might have on this podcast? Is there a grouping of who the guests are going to be? Or are they how did you figure out these guests, and maybe who are some of them?
So I figured out some of them because they're people that I've known or interacted with over the years. I also got some of the guests from talking to people and saying, this is what I'm going to do. Who do you think would be interesting? So for instance, and we're going to have an international group for sure. Already we have people like George Samula, who I worked with in Uganda. And George is one of the founders and the chief legal officer of a company called Tower Co. of Africa, and really one of the finest in-house counsel I've ever worked with as a young lawyer. And since I worked with him, he's gone off and with a group of people founded his own company. And they've been doing it for 4 or 5 years now. And I think George will have a lot of interesting things to say about how do you go into a startup, starting up your own company as the head of legal. We will have, closer to home, we'll have my friend Daryl Cates, who graduated the same year as I did. He spent a number of years in private practice, including at Dinsmore and Scholl, but most recently retired after 25 years at General Electric I believe he was the lead labor counsel for GE Aerospace. So he'll have a lot of interesting things to talk about. And, I think there will be some commonality when we're talking to the in-house lawyers. At some point most of them made a decision to leave private practice and go in-house. And I don't think it will be the same answer for all of them as to why they took that step. But we'll find out. And then on the litigation side, got a number of different international lawyers like Andrew Battison, who is the head of the international commercial arbitration practice at Linklaters. Andrew's from Australia, but is currently based in Singapore. We're going to have my old friend Jordan Green, who I practiced with many years ago, who is of counsel at Perkins Coie. Jordan is a white-collar criminal defense lawyer, and hopefully that will be a very interesting conversation because he's one of the more interesting people I know. So those are just a few, but I'm got a list of 25 to 30 people that we're going to be talking to. So we're going to be doing this podcast, we hope, at least twice a month.
Well, that sounds amazing, and it seems like this is a resource for a number of students, especially ones in the law school, while also being a potential resource for those just beginning their career or those thinking about a career move, possibly more into the corporate or in-house space. I think it sounds amazing. I think there's a lot of potential for it to open a lot of new doors for some of our law students and some of those people thinking about the corporate law field. Is there anything else you want the potential listeners to know about the podcast, what they should do if, maybe one of the guests interests them?
So a couple of things, and I think here I'm talking to our UC Law students more than anyone else. To the extent that we are having a guest come on that is in or from Cincinnati, we're going to try and get them to come record the episodes at the law school. We'll put it on the calendar so people know that it's going to happen, so that people can come and attend the recording, and hopefully we'll have a Q&A session, whether it's live as part of the podcast or we do it afterwards. We'll be up to the technical side of the house to decide if we can make that happen, but it will give people an opportunity and our students an opportunity to interact with people in a different setting than going to an interview and getting to see people kind of in their natural state.
All right, everyone. Thank you for listening to this episode, the preview episode for the Corporate Law Lab podcast, where you are going to be able to hear from a ton of corporate law professionals from around the world, hosted by the director of our Corporate Law Center, Neil Taylor. The episodes will be coming soon, and hopefully will be coming in about every 2 weeks as soon as the first one drops. So thank you again, Neil, for letting us into what this podcast is going to be, and we look forward to hearing the first episode.
Thank you. Thank you for co-hosting this first episode. And I do expect that we will at some point have other students participate as co-hosts in future episodes.
That sounds awesome, and I can't wait for that.
All right. Thanks very much.